who's in and who's out for the Super Motocross playoffs, what things have riders changed, and just what's new. What's new we've learned here on Friday in Concord, North Carolina. A lot of people call this Charlotte because, of course, it is where the Charlotte Motor Speedway is. We're on the drag strip, the ZMAX drag strip. I think we're technically in Concord, though, but we're in North Carolina. It is September the 5th. It is the day before racing at the first round of the SMX playoffs in the 2025 championship. I'm your host, Michael Lindsay, here at Vital MX, and as always, I spend a little time wandering the pits, talking to riders, talking to team guys, talking to mechanics, and try to pick apart a few things. It's honestly been pretty quiet coming into this round. I think a lot of guys are just on a reset. Nothing really that new, other than we'll give you a little brief overview of what is, of course, going on this weekend. The biggest thing is maybe explaining the format a little bit and explaining how people are qualifying. So they've talked about all year, if you're top 20 in 450 combined points, so that's Supercross and Pro Motocross, if you're top 20 combined, you are automatically seeded into this event and you don't have to qualify. If you're top 20 in the same thing, 250 MX and Supercross points combined, you are automatically seeded. However, if riders are injured or picking one class over the other, any of those options, if basically somebody inside the top 20 that's seeded is not racing in that class, they do not just give that spot to the next person down. They basically have an LCQ, or what they're calling a wild card. So this year, out of the 20 450 riders that are seeded, we have 4 that are not competing this weekend. Of course, a lot of people saw the Jorge Prado announcement. We'll get into a little bit of that in a minute. Aaron Plessinger is still sitting out with illness and getting back to 100%. Jason Anderson, of course, is also sitting out, and then Colt Nichols is still recovering from injury. So that means 16 of the 20 seeded riders for the 450 class are here. They will do seeded practice, seeded qualifying, and go straight into the mains tomorrow. They will be running a wild card race, which has 10 entries in it. In normal situation, they would take 2 people out of that race to fill the 22-man gate. But since we're short 4 riders, they're going to take 6 riders tomorrow in that race. 250s, I believe, is the same amount. I think we had 16 in seed today because we have Chance Hymas out with injury, Michael Mosiman out with injury, Mikkel Harrup out with injury, and RJ Hampshire was seated in both classes, and he chose 450. So, again, we're going to have 9 or 10 guys trying to qualify tomorrow, and they're going to take probably 6 out of 250s. One person we did not expect to be back, or we're kind of on the fence with, is Julian Beaumer. After the concussion we saw him sustain towards the end of Pro Motocross. Definitely talking to the team, it was a little touch and go for this week, but he's able to be here, so Julian is in. Interesting thing with that seating, so once they have to put riders in the wildcard race, naturally they would pick 21st to 30th or 31st to go into that race. However, other riders are not available, whether it's also injuries, whether it's unavailable in their teams or inavailabilities in their schedules. So as the promoter calls riders outside that top 20, hey, are you going to race? Are you going to race? If they say no, they go farther down the list. They had to go so far down the list for the 250 class that Luke Neese is racing. He was number 53 in total combined 250 points this year. Now 53 points, he was 53rd on the list. That's how many riders said no. 450s, we got all the way to Derek Drake, who was seated 42nd. It's just the nature of the beast. You have guys that are on Supercross only programs, privateers. For some people, it's a late notice. Again, some of the riders I was talking to got calls only early in the week and just couldn't put a program together. Great example is the Club MX, the FXR Muck-Off Club MX team. They are racing with Cody Schock in the 450 class. He is not seated in, has come out of that wild card race. And then you have Max Volan, who is seated in, Maximus Volan in the 250s. Devin Simonson, who is riding for them, was called, but he was seated somewhere in the deep 40s in the 250 class. They gave him the call, but he's preparing for World Supercross on a 450, and they gave him such a late call that the team basically said they couldn't get a 250 together for him. So that's a great example of even some teams that have a good amount of support couldn't get something together for this race. A team that was able to get something together, oddly enough, my home with Shade right now with the AO KTM group, is they have 2 riders that was supposed to be in the wild cards this weekend, spots. Lux Turner, who is still racing. Avery Long is sitting out SMX to deal with some health issues and get ready for 2026. So last minute, they called up Cole Thompson to fill in. Cole Thompson was going to race these 3 SMXs on his own Kawasaki, because that's what he's racing in World Supercross. But he wanted to take the opportunity, so he is on an AO KTM this weekend, so look for the number 61 in those wildcard races. Got to give up to Cole. He rode the bike for the first time today in practice. Speaking about practice, this is kind of one of the cool things about the SMX races. Part of the reason why I'm doing this on kind of the opposite side of the pits I normally do. I typically end up doing this near the factory rigs. Usually Honda's my backdrop. The pits are full right now in the evening. It's 5:30 in the afternoon. They're doing autograph signings with the Lawrences, with Deegan, everybody at the factory trucks. They're doing a podcast mashup. Mathis, I think Lewis is over there and a bunch of guys. They try to treat these events a little bit more like a 2-day event. We have the 2 practices for 450 seated and non-seated and 250 seated and non-seated today, and then the time qualifying, they had 1 time qualifier for the SMX Next group, which, speaking of which, we do have SMX Next this weekend and next weekend in St. Louis, but they will not be at Vegas. One injury that came up today, bummer for Liam Olaf with the SLR Honda team. He broke his wrist on the 2nd lap, so he will not be in the SMX Next main tomorrow. So get well soon, Liam. But again, really cool how they do these. If you haven't been to one, there is a little bit more going on a Saturday here. So a little bit more to shoot, a little bit more to see on track. Talking about riders, what are they doing for these SMX races? Because of course they are very Supercross oriented, but they're technically hybrid tracks. They have some outdoor sections. Talking to a few teams, it doesn't sound like anybody other than a few guys that didn't have resources. There's a couple teams that are on basically a 100% Supercross setting and they're just playing with clickers. Teams that had some testing time or were able to ride any sort of a built hybrid track they could, like take your guys that are at the Dog Pound, take the Star team, take Triumph, all those guys that rode those combo tracks. Sounds like they tweaked their setups a little bit. A few of the teams I spoke to said the forks are really similar, if not basically identical to their Supercross setting. Maybe the overall stiffness is similar, but they've changed the character a little bit. But quite a few teams mentioned to me that they're on a little bit softer shock setting. However, I will say I think that caught a lot of guys out today because the track here in Charlotte has a lot of non-regulation size jumps, a lot of big doubles with pretty peaky faces, and the dirt was really soft from the rain that occurred last night. Saw a lot of riders nearly saw Jesus today. Had some near-death moments when basically they go to pump through the jump face, the material is soft and grabs the bike, the shock loads out too hard and basically blows through the stroke. So quite a few guys try to enter Indonesia today. So we'll see how that plays out tomorrow if some guys try to backtrack with the shock settings, and then number 2, just how that plays out in the race. We may have a few close calls here and there. Speaking of the track tomorrow, again, wet because of rain last night. It actually turned out pretty good. It rutted up. The clay, the dirt mix here, the sand looked really good. It was a little bit challenging for the guys. We don't know what we're going to see tomorrow. There's a really good chance right now of thunderstorms coming into the area around race time tomorrow. So typically knowing how the track prep goes, they will probably try not to put too much moisture in it tonight because they will want some leeway if it does rain tomorrow. So it might be dry in the morning. We might get caught up in the rain and kind of even out. Or if the rain doesn't come, you may see a potentially fairly dry race come race times with the 2 motos for each class. And then SMX Next tomorrow is only racing once. So you have your 250 main, your 450 main, both the first ones. Then you'll have SMX Next as kind of the intermission race, and then 250 race 2 and 450 race 2 tomorrow evening. If you're playing fantasy, if you're playing Vital MX Fantasy, if you're playing full fantasy, both the lockouts are adjusted to before the wild card races. So if you need to make picks in either of those series, make sure you get them done early. It is not before the race, the main start. It's actually before the wild card races start. I guess we have to talk about a little bit with the ongoing Prado situation, or lack of an update this week. And we saw the update coming into the race that they've chosen to sit out. I could beat it. I mean, it's getting beat to like a dead horse at this point. We've done so much content and video around it and updates. The simple thing is Kawasaki is not answering questions. Most of us in media asked for interviews today, asked for more of a reference of what's going on, and we were all denied anything further. So if you're asking why nothing really extensive else comes out about, why there isn't any more real info beyond the speculation things we hear, that's because neither party will actually on record comment on it, which is a little bit to be expected. But yes, we've all asked. There's actually a group text between a bunch of us media and Kawasaki's PR, and we got told no interviews, no further comment, that's it. Yeah, so we will not see Prado though across any of these SMX races. You will not see him at Motocross of Nations, and I would say shortly after MXON is when this situation will finally unravel itself. This series, the races here will be really interesting for a few riders, and one I have highlighted in the 250 class is Time Master. I've talked about this a few times this year. He does not technically have a deal for next year. Initially, Kawasaki announced him as in a multi-year deal with the Pro Circuit team, but then we asked mid-season, it was actually an option. They have re-signed Garrett Marchbanks. They currently have a 5-man team for next year. Even if Garrett ends up moving up and taking over Prado's spot, they have Enzo Temmerman in the wings that they're super happy with. Temmerman wants to stay with Cowie, whether he has to ride SMX next again, whether he can race Pro. If Garrett moves up, I think that's who it takes. So Ty, in a sense, I feel like is racing for a job over these 3 SMX Next races, and honestly, there hasn't been a lot of clues on where he can end up. That's even been a conversation I've had with a couple media members and teams today, and nobody really has an idea what that's going to look like. A couple contract things have done this week. The club team is officially filled out now. They have their 4-man roster for next year. They, of course, still had Cody Schock on 2 more years on contract. Maximus Volan's good through next year. They signed Devin Simonson full-time for next year, not just as a fill-in. And then they have also signed Hunter Yoder for next year. So Yoder will be transferring from the PRMX Partzilla squad over to Club MX after these SMX Next races are wrapped up. Another little interesting detail I noticed, the Quad Lock Honda team. They've been working with Factory Connection, I believe, for the last year or 2. I heard they would be doing something different, and they've already moved on before the end of the year. Both Shane McElrath and I believe Joey Savacci's bikes have active ride suspension on this week. Matt from Active was working with the HEP team, which is directly across from me here with Roxon, for the past 2 years or 3 years or so before Roxon went to working with REP this year. So 2 of those guys in the Quad Lock tent are under that, and then Dean Wilson's bike has just Showa logos on, I believe, from his little filling gig at HRC this year. I believe he's just getting some direct help from Showa for his bike at the moment. Another little suspension one I noticed, RJ Hampshire partway through Pro Motocross got basically the factory or works version of the WP air fork that a lot of the MXGP guys run. I know there's always this debate on how if air forks are good or not. Shocker. Almost everybody in the MXGP Austrian side, like your KTM Husky teams in Europe, your factory level guys, almost every one of them are on air fork, like DeWolf, Hurlings, all these guys are on a factory version of it. That has finally made its way stateside. Hampshire's been running a bit in outdoors, and now Malcolm Stewart, his teammate under the Rockstar Energy Husqvarna rig, is running it as well this weekend. Rider D is also on air fork on the gas side, but it's more of like the production based one. That's probably because I don't think they could run that fork on a 250 in America because it's probably not homologated and for sale. So for now, it's kind of a works 450 only thing. Sexton and Barsha are basically on the KYB insert WP fork that they've been on quite a bit this year. Some comments from Tom Vial in the press conference today about the shock issues. He said since they've reverted back to his Supercross setup, to that valving setup, to that shock design, like they basically said that issue that he faced at the end of Pro Motocross has not occurred, and he doesn't seem too worried about it. Of course, I asked Tom Vial today in the press conference about this basically being his last 3 races in the USA. He still won't really comment on it, but he kind of talked about how, you know, it's the end of his time, at least in the 250 class, and how he's going to a 450 and what he accomplished here while he's here. But as we have talked about, and it's fairly well known at this point, Tom Vial is departing the US after SMX to go back to race MXGP for the factory Honda HRC team, but he's not done with Supercross. He will be racing World Supercross races this year aboard a factory Honda MXGP bike. So I don't know if that'll get some assistance from the US team or not, but yeah, he'll be on that bike. Interesting little rumor that was floating around, I'll squash a little bit, is there was a floating rumor that Jet Lawrence may race a 250 at Motocross of Nations. I went directly over and asked him this morning, not Jet, but a member of family, and they debunked it and said they laughed at how much that got spun around the pits, but their plan is still that Jet will be in MX1, defending on the number 1 plate. Kyle Webster will race the HRC 250, again, like he did before, running the number 2 with Hunter Lawrence, the number 3. Actually, I say that. I haven't checked if they're going to run Jet in MX1 or Hunter in Open. I got to double check that. I believe that what I said part was right. So Webster is not here right now. He went home. I believe his wife is about to have a child soon, so he went home for a week or 2. He's going to come back out, put in a couple good weeks of prep down at the dog pound on that HRC 250, and get ready to go defend for Team Austria at Motocross of Nations on a full Team HRC supported effort at Ironman this year. One last little note, cool thing the Team Honda HRC guys are doing this week, Team Honda HRC Progressive to be exact. They have a unique graphic scheme this weekend. It's for I feel bad, I actually forgot this off the top of my head. It is basically a child's brain cancer treatment a fundraiser of some sort, charity. I'm so sorry, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. Look on their social media. It's got the exact name and links. All the graphics and bodywork and stuff those guys are running this weekend will be going up for an auction to raise money for that effort. It's actually the same one I think they did in SMX last year. So I first walked in this race and it kind of reminded me of the St. Jude graphics a little bit, and I thought I was terrible and I'd missed that this wasn't our St. Jude's race. It isn't. It's an individual fundraiser that the team, Honda HRC Progressive team, is doing. So really cool on them. Check that out on their Instagram to learn a little bit more. Look at their social medias and you can get the links and figure out what's going on with that stuff if you want to donate, if you want to try to get some of that memorabilia or be involved. So yeah, some of the things I learned this Friday here in North Carolina. As always, got any questions, throw in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.